But I think most importantly, I find the things that I'm grateful for. I think gratitude is severely downplayed in the recovery community, right? Because I can think of 1,000 reasons why my life may suck at this moment, but I can find 1,001 reasons why it's great. And if I find that 1,001 reasons why it's great and what I'm grateful for, then I can step outside of myself and really be able to hone, who I am and the recovery program that I have and practice humility, man. Like to me, I know that I've been through some shit, right? But then there's somebody that's day one who's just stepping out of their shit that needs somebody to look up to or is looking to get what I have. And it's on me to be that person that people look to and say, "Hey, I want what you have." And what you have looks great. So how do I get that?
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Recovery Couch, where we share honest stories of healing and transformation. Today, I'm joined by Sean Young. Sean believes addiction doesn't start with substances. Sean believes that it starts with years of compounded trauma. And his story begins with childhood trauma and a deep desire for his father's approval, a pursuit that shaped many of the choices he made early in life. Sean's path led him into the military, where alcohol became a coping mechanism, followed by multiple deployments to war zones. Over time, Sean's drinking escalated, eventually leading to an ultimatum from his girlfriend and a season of white-knuckled sobriety. After returning home and facing a series of life-altering events, Sean found himself in Veterans Court, where his real recovery began. We will dive into Sean's story right after a word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. Whether you're buying your first home, selling, or making a move, Greg brings integrity, expertise, and heart to every step of the journey. He's not just a realtor, he's a trusted guide who puts your needs first. Call Greg today at 937-477-8975 and let him help you find your next home. And don't forget to tell him the Recovery Couch sent you. Hello, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Recovery Couch, where we deliver unapologetic, raw, faith-based messages that are covered with the blood of Jesus. I always encourage my guests to speak from the heart. I encourage my guests to speak with no filter, because Psalm 139 verse 4 tells us that God knows our words before we even speak them. Romans 5:8 tells us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That's why the Recovery Couch exists. To meet others where they are, because at the Recovery Couch, we believe that when you offer people a space to be real, then you also offer them a space to heal. My guest today is Sean Young. And through the email exchanges leading up to this podcast, one of my favorite things that any guest has ever said when asked, "Do you have anything that you would like for me to share or anything I need to know?" Sean said, "I'm an open book." I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show, Sean Young. Sean, how you doing?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. All praises, my friend. So tell us about your story, man.
Oh man. So first I starting off, I just want to say I don't believe that addiction starts with just the use. It starts with years of compounded trauma as far as childhood trauma, everything like that. And I've suffered just about every form of trauma that you can think about. When I was a young kid, I suffered a lot of childhood trauma from my father and my mother, rightfully so, but predominantly my father. One of my first memories in life was being a little kid, right? Like and splashing around in the bathtub, and I had these little squirt guns that had like Macho Man and Hulk Hogan. Like I'm a huge wrestling fan, and I had these little squirt guns that had Macho Man and Hulk Hogan on them, and I was squirting all over the place. And my dad comes in with a belt and beats my ass, and that was at the age of like 3 or 4, and I learned a very unhealthy fear for my father. Not a fear of respect, but a fear of violence. And so, because of that and a few other things, my sister and I were taken away from my parents and put into foster care. And my grandparents ended up getting custody of my sister and I, which put us more, uh, more in the face of danger because my father was still accessible to my sister and I because of my grandparents on my father's side. So a program that was supposed to protect us really didn't. And so my grandparents would use my father as fear against me and say, if you don't straighten up, or, I wasn't a bad kid growing up. I just did everyday kid stuff. And my grandparents would say, if you don't straighten up, your father's going to hear about this and you're going to have to pay him. And so it created a very underlying fear of my father. And when I was about 10 years old, so I lived with my grandparents from the age of 4 to 10. And at the age of 10, I was sat down with my sister at a McDonald's play place in between my grandparents, my father, stepmom, and my mom. And they said, "Who do you want to live with?" And I was forced to choose, right? Like two of the groups of people would be hurt by my choice, and one group of people would uh, be okay with my choice. I chose my dad because I always, from a young kid, and I'm pretty sure you can relate. Young boys, we love our mothers, but we try to seek the approval of our father, no matter what it is. And the, you know, as far as like spiritual lineage as well, right? Like that is very prevalent in the Bible. Uh, you know, getting the approval of your father as a young boy. So I struggled with that pretty much my whole life, like trying to gain the approval of my father. When I ended up moving into my dad's house in Erie, Pennsylvania, um, it got rough. My dad was, physically abusive, mentally, emotionally, and I lived with my dad from the age of 10 to 16, and so I have these like weird 6 year periods in my childhood where I was just bounced around from house to house with it, which is not healthy. Um, because you learn you adapt these survival mechanisms that you're not supposed to have until you're an adult. And I'm having to learn these as a young kid, and so the abuse started small, where it was name calling, where it was smacks on the back of the head, and then it turned to pressure points into full blown abuse. The first time that I remember being like absolutely terrified of my father, I was in the kitchen and my dad walked in, grabbed me by the throat, hoisted me up above his head, and looked at me in the eyes and said, "I'm gonna fucking kill you." And I started seeing black. And ever since then, it ramped up because there was no repercussions for him. He got away with doing what he wanted to do, and so it got worse. He would tell me to go practice falling down in the backyard, and I knew that that meant that he was going to beat my ass. And so I would go outside, and he would throw me from fence post to fence post, and then like follow up with the elbow to the back of the head, which causes traumatic brain injury for anybody that doesn't know. So I'm already starting out at a young age with traumatic brain injury. At the age of 16, I got kicked out of my dad's house for getting a bad grade in school. And he chased me around the neighborhood, and there was enough people that saw it that intervened the only time. And I got chased around the neighborhood with a phone book. He smacked me a few times in the head, in the face, and then sent me back to my grandparents' house where I lived for about a year. And in that year, I found some kind of normalcy in my life, and I started diving deep into religion, and I was Pentecostal, and I ended up saying that I wanted to go to a Bible college in Ohio, and I had a full ride to go there. The pastor of my church was going to pay for it. When I told my dad, he said, "No, you're going to join the military," and that's not definitely what I wanted to do. And him and I had some words over it, and he ended up driving down to my grandparents' house 8 hours away to drive me to a recruiting station where I would sit there and wait to sign a contract. And so when I signed this contract, I had about I want to say it was in April, and by the time that I was ready to ship, it was my birthday, and so I left. I ended up moving back to my dad's house for like 3 months, and before I left for basic training, it was the worst 3 months of my life. I ran 15 miles a day at a 6 minute pace, and if you know how fast that is that's
Flying,
ridiculously,
dude. That's
yeah,
cooking.
flying, yeah. And I would do calisthenics all day. If you know a lot of like older movies, like Paul Newman movies, there's a real famous Paul Newman movie called I just lost the name of it. Cool
Cool
Hand
Hand
Luke.
Luke.
Cool Hand Luke. And I think you know where I'm going with this. My dad made me dig the hole in my backyard multiple times a day till my hands bled. And this was all right up before basic training. And so the only person that really like stepped in and said anything was this old retired Navy SEAL. That was my gym coach. And he was like, he pretty much told my dad, like, if he doesn't stop what he's doing, you're gonna destroy him before he even joins the army. And so my dad stopped for about a week before I went into, before I actually shipped out. And then I shipped out. And the fucked up thing about that whole situation is when my dad drove me over to the recruiting station to go to get shipped out, he didn't say goodbye. He didn't say I love you, I'm proud of you, good luck, none of that. As soon as I shut the door, he peeled out. And so it was like like his problem was given away. And so I joined basic, I joined the army, went to basic, and that was easy for me because I had been used to being screamed at. I've been used to being beat. They were stepping away from beating candidates at that time. But I was used to all that stuff. I was used to the strenuous physical activity. And then I went to my advanced individual school, which was right there at Fort Sill where I was at. So I didn't have to move. And then I went to airborne school and I learned how to professionally jump out of airplanes. And I loved it. I was terrified of heights, but I loved it. And my first duty station was Italy. And the first weekend I was there, that's when I say my addiction started. I started drinking really heavily right off the bat. I had not known freedom my whole life, and then I got introduced to a little taste of freedom, and that's where my addiction kicked off. And with that unit, I ended up deploying twice to Afghanistan. There's two documentaries that are made about my first deployment, Restrepo and Korengal. Great documentaries.
Say it
And
again.
Restrepo and Korengal.
That's how you spell that.
Resterpo. And then the second one is Korengal, Korengal.
This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by JB Davis at South Dayton Toyota. For integrity, service, and unbeatable deals, call JB and his team at 513-267-5225 and tell them the Recovery Couch sent you.
And so in between those deployments, like I wasted no time when coming back home, right? Like they were pretty traumatic deployments. And within 30 minutes of being off the plane, being back in my room, I was already drinking again. And my drinking like got really bad to the point where I had significant others and they would tell me that, hey, if you don't quit drinking, we're going to leave. And I didn't want to feel that pain because I'd already lost so much at that point that um, I was dry drunking. I was white knuckling it. And then something would happen and I'd start drinking again. And then they would come back with the same thing. If you drink more than we're gonna leave. And once again, I didn't want to feel that pain. And I came back from my second deployment. I met my daughter's mom, and her and I became entangled really quickly. We got married probably 5 months after we met, and I transitioned from Italy to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and on the trip there, she got pregnant. So I'm now going to be a father, and I did not want to be the father that I had growing up, right? And so I did everything in my power, but there was still that one thing that was hanging on, and that was the alcohol. And so I ended up getting deployed a third time to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne, and I came back home to a brand new child. And so a brand new life, something that I had not been accustomed to, but I knew that I didn't want to be the same way that my father was to me. And so I fought extra hard not to do that. But once again, still the alcohol, I'm white knuckling it, dry drunking it. And every time something would happen, anytime a fight would happen, I'd start drinking again. And So I never really worked on anything. And on that deployment, on that third deployment, I watched my best friend get blown up in front of me by an IED. He ended up sequentially dying. And so I had this other lingering thing in the background that I didn't want to address. I numbed it out by the alcohol. I took his picture, I plastered it on the wall, and I would walk by every day. But as I'm walking by it, like I'm becoming numb to it. I'm not addressing the real serious traumatic incident that happened, and I'm not addressing any of the traumatic incidents that happened in my life, but just kind of letting them go, letting them free float. And it became very tumultuous really quickly. And I got deployed a fourth time with the 82nd Airborne. And on that deployment, it was like super easy. We guarded the Department of State in Afghanistan in a hotel, and I had a lot of time to think. And in that time, I made a decision to end my marriage to my daughter's mom, and that that affected not just my daughter, her, and or my daughter, my then ex, wife, but me as well, and then people surrounding it. So it was done in a very traumatic way, where I was the asshole, and rightfully so. But we're much better friends now than we were then, and I'm grateful for that. But anyways, so I get back from this deployment, and I end up driving my daughter and her mother to Georgia to go see, to go live with them, and it was it was traumatic because as I'm leaving, my daughter's standing in the doorway looking at me and said, "Dad, don't go," and it just fucked me up. And so as I'm, driving home there, it was an 8 hour trip, 8 hour drive, and I cried the whole 8 hours of it. But as that relationship ended, another one ushered its way in, and I thought that everything was okay and that it was going to work out, and unfortunately it didn't. In that time, I got stationed in Alaska, so I was in the last airborne unit that in existence. And as I'm prepping for another deployment with this unit, like they're like, "Hey, look, we got to do a pre-deployment memory test on you." And so I do this like memory test, and I bomb it. I absolutely bomb it. And so I got diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. And so it's like a whole bunch. It's fancy terms for a lot of concussions over time, whether it's on deployment, an army rotation, a bad jump that I've had, or even stuff prior to the army. I was suffering from that, and I thought that it was normal. And so now I have this other compounded problem, but I'm not drinking, but I'm not talking about my problems. I'm literally just abstinent from everything, and I'm trying to live this healthy lifestyle. And I spend most of my days in the hospital doing different forms of therapy, everything that I could to like try and work on connecting new neural pathways in my brain and make them functional. But there's still these things that were happening in the background. As I'm taking care of myself, my marriage is slipping and failing, and eventually ended. And then I got notification that the army didn't want me anymore, and they were going to medically separate me or retire me. So I had an identity crisis. So all of these things, like it created this perfect storm for the suicide attempt that I had planned. And it was like, I made every excuse why I didn't want to be alive, and none why I wanted to be alive. I looked at my daughter and I said, she has a great stepfather. She doesn't need me. And I made all the reasons in my head. People don't care about me. All that stuff. And I had a relapse on Cinco de Mayo 2019, or sorry, 2018, and I took my truck and I drove it into a tree at 70 miles an hour, and the engine block was like this far from my face, and it was crazy. And I woke up in the hospital, and I realized that something needed to change, and that change was me. And I started working on it, but I wasn't fully grasping it. The one thing I wasn't grasping was like talking about my problems, and sequentially like talking about the alcohol. And so I quit drinking again for a year. I met somebody else after the divorce finalized, and she asked me if I was okay to drink. And at first I was like, no, 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 I don't want to. Then I was like, different place. I mean, all of the things that we learn in the 12 step programs, right? different place. I'm no longer going to be drinking beer. I'm just going to drink liquor. It'll only be these many. And it just, I couldn't keep true to that promise. And so my addiction kicked full swing again, like full swing. And that was 4th of July, 2019. And that relapse lasted for 9 months, or sorry, 6 months. And at the end of that 6 months, I found myself in jail for
Let me ask you a
a,
question real
yeah,
quick, Sean. I hate to
yeah,
interrupt.
yeah,
I want to get on a timeline here. So
yeah.
you relapsed Cinco de Mayo of what year?
2018.
2018.
Mm-hmm.
And then new girlfriend was what year?
2018. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
and the back into the drinking full
2019.
21,
2019.
2019.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And
Sorry about that.
no, you're good. You're good. And so I started drinking again. And at the end of 2019, December 7th, 2019, I found myself in jail on an assault charge. And I was blaming everybody for my problems. And I was, saying, oh, at the time I was married to the woman that I ended up dating. So like I'm on third marriage right now, and I was blaming her. I said, she could have prevented me from drinking. Really, nobody could have, right? But I was like making all these problems, or I was blaming everybody for my problems. And there was this old Alaskan Native man that looked at me, and they called me Viking in jail, and so he's like, Viking, shut the fuck up. Like you created all these problems for yourself. Once you can accept that, then everything's going to get better. At first, I was very resistant to it. And like 2 hours, for 2 hours, I sat there and I battled with what he said to me. And I was like super resistant to everything he said. And then finally, I was like, okay, he's right. Like I have created all these problems. The drinking is a band-aid, but all these problems are because of the things that I've faced in my life, and I've ran from actually addressing them. So it's wild because like the moment that we accept and surrender is the moment that like the door opens up. And for me, my proverbial door that opened up was a corrections officer knocking on my door and saying, hey, your bail has been posted. Now, whether call that a God moment or call what, coincidence or whatever it is, it worked. And so I entered into the Veteran Therapeutic Treatment Court in Alaska, and that program saved my life. Absolutely saved my life. They held me to a standard and held me accountable for things that I needed to be held accountable for. They gave me tools to learn and to use when things got really bad. And so the relationship that I was in ended up um, dying off, and I had nothing but my recovery, and I had nothing but the tools that I had in my toolkit, and I used every single one of them. I moved back home. Home for me is in Maryland, so I moved back home and I started to rebuild my life, and I started to face all the things that had bothered me, right? Like the abuse in the childhood. I started addressing the traumatic experiences in Afghanistan that I ran from, and most importantly, I did it sober, and I did it with all the recovery tools that I had. And yeah, it was terrifying, but I love my life now, and I wouldn't give it for the world. Getting sober and working my recovery program has been the best decision I've ever made.
Dude, you've been through some shit, bro.
Yeah, yeah,
This moment, okay, what's up with this? You said an Indian dude, he like Native American Indian dude. So this
yeah,
is like out of a storybook, bro. Like
yeah, yeah,
that was some serious wisdom that he and you said you wrestled with it. You didn't
yeah,
want to hear it. Neither did I when people were telling me like you're the problem. I'm
yeah,
like, no, you don't get it.
yeah,
Um, that sounds like such a profound moment in your life where you started to accept responsibility.
yeah.
Is that true? Am I gathering correctly?
Yeah, I started to accept responsibility, but it was like a blanket, like, yeah, you're right. I have created all the problems, but like actually taking accountability for everything that I've done, like individual, like the amends part of it, didn't come until much later on. And some of those amends that I had to make, I was terrified to make, dude. Like, I've made some shitty decisions, and I've done some shitty things to people. And so going back and really like apologizing for them, where it wouldn't hurt them, um, that's where like the real work started.
Man, that's incredible. So then this guy gives you this profound advice. You
Yeah,
take heed. Uh,
yeah,
sounds like you were finally ready. I mean, that's funny how I'm in a spiritual program myself, and the God that I serve, to me, I look back and I'm like, it's funny how He aligned everything. Like I didn't think I was ready. People started kind of, you know, giving me, hey, it's you need to accept responsibility. You need to
yeah,
accept life on life's terms. You need to admit where you were wrong. And then I start seeing like, okay, yeah, you're right. I did mess up, and you know, I created a tornado and came through and disrupted everybody's peace.
yeah,
And then you go to a veteran treatment center
yep,
right after that in Alaska, you said.
yep,
And right after you get this wisdom from this Indian guy, then you go into this veteran treatment center. They start holding you accountable,
yeah,
which is tough. I don't care what anybody says. Like
yeah,
that, when in the early stages of recovery, I had to go through a veterans court too, and
yeah,
it was just tough. Like, man, quit telling me what to do. I'm trying harder than I've ever tried before, and you just keep stacking all this stuff on.
yeah,
And um, it sounds like you went through something similar to me, where you get towards the end of it, and you start seeing the wisdom in that. Like, okay, I can handle much more than I thought I could handle. They actually built confidence in me when I thought it was tearing me down. And then your third marriage ends,
yeah,
and this is an opportunity for Sean to either fall into self pity and wallow in the hurt and the pain of another relationship ending, or I can utilize these tools that I've been given
yeah.
and redirect my life in a positive way. And that's what you did. And that is the highlight of your story, man. And I commend you big time for that, bro. Way to
Thank you.
go.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of times people use the tools that we're given in scenarios that are easy, right? Like, oh, I woke up and my car battery dies. Let's go sit and say the Serenity Prayer until somebody shows up to help me. And that's no judgment because that's their stress levels. But for me, like I had real like for me, I had a real life traumatic experience because not only did that suck, but it triggered the abandonment wound that I had so deep in me that I didn't even know was existent. And so for me, I really had to sit in it and like feel that level of pain and be like, okay, I can't go back to the way it used to be. Right. Like I absolutely refuse to go back to the way it used to be. I refuse to drink. I refuse to dive into that version of me that I fought so hard to get away from. And so I just used the tools and the skills like they were taught to us, like, hey, what happens when something happens, man? And that's exactly how I used it. And it was only to my benefit. I'm grateful for it.
And that's when you start realizing that, okay, this program works. Like I'm finding gratitude in these
Yeah.
tests. I'm finding like not faking it till I make it. I'm really truly grateful that I had that opportunity to learn that I'm coping with my life better, that I can I know how to handle a situation that intense. And that's what I'm hearing from you too, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But
So what are
veterans,
some practical
good.
tools you use today, Sean? Like uh and let me pose this question more for the
Hmm.
listeners than actually for me. So uh, when I was in early recovery, I heard someone like you talk about the stage of recovery they're in.
Hmm.
I would think like, what, they never have problems, like they don't find themselves getting angry or getting tempted to do this or that or the other. And now that I'm getting deeper into my recovery, I realize no, they did have those things, but they just had the tools to properly work through them. What do you do today when you start feeling triggered, when you start feeling angered, when you start feeling froggy? What tools do you use? What practically on a daily basis?
Right off the bat, breathing technique. And I know that that's not necessarily taught in like recovery programs, but for me, breathing does everything. It starts off right, like I take that breath, that initial deep breath in, and I hold it and I release it. And what that does is it starts to loosen my body up, and I get connected outside with nature. I put my face in the sun if I can. Like right now, we got snow on the ground, so I can't really do that. But typically I would put my face in the sun and I would just let it go away because my triggers lead to depression, which lead to anxiety and all the other spiraling things. So if I can intervene in that moment, then I do that, or I'll go on a drive. But I think most importantly, I find the things that I'm grateful for. I think gratitude is severely downplayed in the recovery community, right? Because I can think of 1,000 reasons why my life may suck at this moment, but I can find 1,001 reasons why it's great. And if I find that 1,001 reasons why it's great and what I'm grateful for, then I can step outside of myself and really be able to hone, who I am and the recovery program that I have, and practice humility, man. Like to me, I know that I've been through some shit, right? But then there's somebody that's day one who's just stepping out of their shit that needs somebody to look up to, or is looking to get what I have, and it's on me to be that person that people look to and say, hey, I want what you have, and what you have looks great, so how do I get that?
I love that. And you kind of answered my last question, which is if you were to encourage somebody in early recovery
Mhm.
who, if they're anything like me, they're looking at, sobriety for the rest of my life like it's just the tallest task and unattainable. How would you encourage them? What type of tools would you tell them to use?
Mm. Well, first off, I would tell them that there's no one set pathway to recovery. It's different. You can take 12-step programs, and within the 12-step programs, there's so many other 12-step programs. Like you got NA, AA, you've got Celebrate Recovery, all these, even ones that are just being pulled up today. I would say dive into those, right? Those are the grassroots, and then find somebody that you can connect with that has a length of sobriety, not day one, right? Like, because you guys are kind of in the same position, but find somebody that has an extended period of recovery where they've been through some stuff and start working with them, right? Keep in communication. My job is not to reach, like at where I'm at now. My job is not to reach out to people, but to be that person that people reach out to. And so reach out to that person consistently, or when you need them, right? Like call them up and say, hey, look, I've had a bad day at work and I just need somebody to talk to, somebody to vent. All right, cool. I'm here. And I would say the third thing is believe in yourself, right? Believe in yourself, because humans are resilient and we're remarkable, and we do things, we defy the odds every single day, and we've been doing that since the creation of humans. So trust yourself and trust that you can do it, and it's just one day at a time. It literally one day at a time. Sometimes it's an hour at a time, sometimes it's a minute at a time, but realize that you don't got to worry about what's coming tomorrow, because it's going to come soon enough. Worry about what's going on right in front of you today.
Fantastic encouragement, man. So honored and thankful that you came on this platform and shared your story with us, Sean. It's an incredible testimony. I know that it has already helped people in their lives, and it will continue to help people in the recovery world. So thank you so much, Sean. And for all the listeners out there, is there any way that if they wanted to reach out to you, Sean, do you have any sort of contact information you'd like to share on the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Facebook, Sean Young. I'm a dude with a big beard. Um, you can find me on TikTok or Instagram under the Sober Shaman Sean. Or you can find my podcast, Recover Out Loud, anywhere you get your podcast.
Awesome stuff, man. Go check that out, Recover Out Loud. And while you're at it, don't forget to pick up a copy of my book, Step Forward Journey Through Addiction, which is out. And I have some sobriety gangster stickers that we're selling too. You can get a bundle deal, $20 for the book and a sticker. So for all the sobriety gangsters out there, let's stick together and we'll smack these things across the nation. So thankful for you, Sean. Stick around. We need to have a little post production chat. And for everybody else, you always have a seat right here on the recovery couch. Second Chance Studios is a professional, sound-isolated recording studio in Canton, Ohio. This studio serves podcasters, recording artists, and video creators. Second Chance Studios is equipped with top-tier equipment like Shure microphones and the Rodecaster Pro 2. Second Chance Studios uses Logic Pro and Adobe Premiere Pro for their editing software. The studio offers expert podcast, video, and audio engineering services. To book a session, call 740-491-0354, and that's Second Chance Studios, where quality meets purpose. Sean, man, I want to thank you so much for your honesty and your willingness to share such a layered and difficult story. Your journey is it's a powerful reminder that trauma left unaddressed doesn't disappear. But healing is possible when we take accountability and we ask for help. From a jailhouse conversation that changed everything to the work you're doing today, hosting a recovery podcast and giving back what was just so freely given to you. Sean, your story shows that redemption doesn't erase the past, but it can redefine your future. To the listeners, if this episode resonated with you in any way, especially if you're a veteran or someone carrying unresolved trauma, then know this: help is available and recovery is possible. I'd like to thank you for joining us on the Recovery Couch. And remember, you always have a seat right here.